The big headline we've been tracking all evening: 2 people have been killed, more than 10 injured after a gunman stormed into a supermarket in southern France in the village of Trebes. President Emmanuel Macron has said that it appears to be a terror attack. After hours of exchanging gunfire with security forces, the attacker has been neutralized. He entered the supermarket at about 11 a.m. local time, took 8 people hostage. His identity and motive are not clear yet. Reports suggest that the attacker claimed allegiance to the Islamic State, and he even demanded the release of Salah Abdel Salam, the prime surviving suspect in the Paris bombings that killed 130 people in 2015. That carnage was also choreographed by the ISIS. This incident took place inside the Super U grocery store in Trebes. France has been on high alert since a string of Islamic extremist attacks in 2015 and 2016 that killed more than 200 people.
In our country, in the south of France, and everything leads us to believe that indeed it is a terror attack, which is, as I said, still ongoing. The police, and in particular the gendarmerie, intervened in a very coordinated manner after what was first an attack against police officers. Please allow me to express our utmost support to all of those addressing the situation. At this point in time, I will not provide any figures. The Paris public prosecutor will shortly provide the relevant information.
Let's go straight to Wion's correspondent in Paris. Lena, the update first. 2 people killed, more than 10 injured, including 1 policeman, I gather.
Yes, there are 3 people killed. The attacker started his rampage this morning by hijacking a car in the outskirts of the southwestern city of Carcassonne. He shot the driver dead, and the passenger is seriously injured in hospital. He then opened fire from that car onto a patrol of riot police who'd gone jogging in civilian clothes, and one of them is also injured in hospital. He then drove to Trebes outside of Carcassonne and parked his car at the Super U supermarket there, walked in and opened fire. 2 people were shot dead there, the supermarket's butcher and a shopper, and there was then a protracted standoff between the attacker and security forces. The Interior Minister Gérald Collomb said that one of the security forces offered to exchange himself for those remaining hostages. That police officer was shot and is also seriously injured in hospital. The Interior Minister described him as a hero. He also identified the attacker as Redouane Lakadim, a 26-year-old local man from Carcassonne. He was saying that he was a small-time drug dealer known to the police as a petty criminal, but not known to be connected to radicalisation. And French media are also reporting that he was released from prison about 18 months ago, which, if it's true, would be a classic profile, really, for the kind of lone wolf attacker that we've seen in recent years here in France. People are frequently radicalised in prison.
And has the area been declared safe? Has the cordon been lifted?
Well, the incident's now over. Of course, police have been saying to local people to stay away from that supermarket throughout the afternoon, but the attacker was shot dead about an hour and a half ago. So the police operation is over, and as we were saying, there are at least a dozen injured people who are now being treated in hospital.
Elena, thanks very much for that update from Paris. Our cover story tonight: a trade war looms on the world. US President Donald Trump set out to fix the trade deficit with China. He's triggered a war of sorts instead. He spooked global markets. India's Sensex closed in the red today, registering a fall of more than 400 points. Asian markets also nosedived, the Shanghai index tumbling by more than 3%. Japan's Nikkei fell more than 4% in today's trade. The big question in India is this: when the world's biggest economies, China and the US, fight, how will it hurt us, and how much? Does Donald Trump plan to take this beyond China? Which other countries could he target next? Last month, remember, he gave some clues when he raised the issue of high import duty on American goods in India.
Scott Walker has a wonderful company called Harley Davidson in Wisconsin, right? Great. So when they send a motorcycle to India, as an example, they have to pay 100% tax, 100%. Now, the Prime Minister, who I think is a fantastic man, called me the other day. He said, we are lowering it to 50%. I said, okay, but so far we're getting nothing. So we get nothing, he gets 50, and they think we're doing, like they're doing us a favor. That's not a favor. And you know what I'm talking about.
That's what he said a month back. India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Suresh Prabhu, has expressed concern over unilateral trade action by America. He was speaking after a two-day informal meeting of World Trade Organization members. Remember, this matter has gone to the WTO. The Indian minister said that unilateral trade actions by certain countries could harm everyone in the long run. The Indian government has been concerned about the rise of protectionism around the world. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi even raised this issue at the World Economic Forum in Davos this year. So we return to the question we asked. How much trouble does this spell for India? First of all, this is bad news when it comes to market sentiment. You've seen the impact on Dalal Street. Second, trade wars make currencies volatile. India should be prepared for the chaos on that front. Third, this may push up crude oil prices, which in turn will increase India's fuel bill, not to mention the higher cost of imports. Fourth, the US Central Bank is raising interest rates, and that has spooked investors. So some of the money coming to India may also dry up. But beyond that, very little will change for you and me. Remember, China is America's biggest trading partner. It accounts for more than 16% of its trade deficit. India doesn't even figure in the top 5. At 1.9%, India is the 9th largest trading partner of America. That's not a very big number. India's trade surplus of almost $23 billion is minuscule compared to China's $375 billion. So when President Donald Trump makes a lot of noise, he may not really target India directly. But what about other countries? Is a trade war now imminent? Is world trade going down the tube? Much depends on how China responds. While both sides are pulling no punches when it comes to the rhetoric, the buzz is that Donald Trump has left open sufficient window to negotiate a resolution with the Chinese.
World headlines screaming trade war may be quite off the mark. The general view is that Donald Trump imposing tariffs on 1,300 products imported from China may be no more than a slap on Beijing's wrist. In fact, many believe it will do little to get China to change its trade policies. But first, let's take a quick look at what Trump has announced. 25% tariffs on 1,300 China-made products. These products are across information, communications, aerospace, and machinery industries. Total value of the tariffs is from $60 billion to $50 billion.
It's important to recognize that there has been a growing sense of frustration within the business community about the lack of progress on market access openings and China's increasing use of industrial policies. In other words, there are reasons and a desire on the part of the business community to see a tougher approach taken by the U.S. government with China. However, our members are not in favor of using sweeping tariffs to try to address these issues.
The U.S. has accused China of theft of its intellectual property, which the Wall Street Journal in a recent report valued at $600 billion annually. The U.S. believes theft of intellectual property has enabled China to compete with American firms in high-tech areas. China denies this, saying its technology is homegrown. Trump's trade representative has threatened the use of Section 301 of the U.S. Trade Act, which authorizes a range of actions, including retaliation, to end any unfair or discriminatory trade measure by foreign governments. But no action of any kind is imminent, going by the strategy unveiled by the U.S. government. China's technology licensing practices will be taken to the World Trade Organization. The WTO normally takes years to resolve issues. The US government will closely scrutinize Chinese investment aimed at getting American technology. New investment restrictions will have to be framed, but no time frame or deadlines has been set.
Somebody imposes a trade war on us, we'll fight to the end. As for the overall China-US relationship, we always believe that the right approach is to base ourselves on better mutual respect and expand our cooperation, manage possible differences in a constructive way, and achieve win-win outcome. We still follow this approach, and we hope there will be reciprocity on the U.S. side.
For the record, China has already announced it could impose $3 billion in tariffs on 128 US-made products, including pork, wine, fruits and steel. It has also hinted tariffs could be imposed on the $14 billion trade, potentially hitting American farmers who form a major Trump voting base. There are also indications China could hit imports of American-made textiles.
中国不希望发生贸易战，也不会主动挑起贸易战。
China does not want a trade war and will not proactively provoke a trade war. But we are not afraid of and will not hide from a trade war. We are well prepared for Section 301 probe. We will firmly safeguard China's legitimate rights and interests. We will closely monitor related developments of the Section 301 probe, and China will respond once the US implements related measures.
China's response has been muted, suggesting it does not want to do anything now that could further rattle world trade. Worldwide, there are concerns Trump's actions could erode business investor confidence, which at some point will hit the stock market, eroding consumer confidence. There could be worse to come if China does not budge from the way it does business. Bureau Report, Wion.
The devil, they say, is always in the detail. But for now, the specifics about Donald Trump's decision still remain sparse. Here's what we know. The Trump administration has identified 1,300 product lines as potential targets. These tariffs will mostly target products that businesses use rather than consumer goods. But like any smart businessman will tell you, it's ultimately the customer that bears the cost. Last year, US government figures could give us some idea into what kind of exports are bothering the American president. The trade deficit between the United States and China stands at a little over $375 billion. The US imported $70 billion worth of cell phones and related parts from China. The value of computer imports stood at $46 billion. Computer parts and accessories are also high-value imports. They were valued at $32 billion. Beyond technology, Americans imported $21 billion worth of furniture from China. Even shoes manufactured in China have high demand in the US. Their imports were valued at $11.5 billion. It's certain that Trump's decision to impose these tariffs will hurt those businessmen who relied on China for manufacturing. Donald Trump intends to create more jobs by cutting down America's dependence on imports, but these measures could prove to be counterproductive. Listen into this.
The long-term effect of these tariffs is what you would anticipate, that if U.S. goods aren't as competitive abroad and that we have to change our supply chain and start looking for lower-cost goods elsewhere, which is not China, but maybe we're looking at Vietnam and so forth, that has a lot of costs because we've already put if you think of Foxconn and Apple and those types of supply chain relations, those are huge investments that they developed, huge capital investments. So that's going to cost sometimes billions of dollars to reinvest and capitalize different plants elsewhere for U.S. firms.
So he is on the war path. Can Donald Trump win this war? The short answer is no. China has said it doesn't want a trade war, but it doesn't fear one either. It has announced a tit-for-tat move, a reciprocal tax, if you will, on $3 billion of imports from America. And this may only be the first step. China plans to pursue legal action against America at the World Trade Organization. It can explore many other options. Sample this. China is a big client of Boeing. It buys American-made commercial jets. It could turn to non-American companies and hurt the aviation industry in the US. Then there's the case of American tech giants, Apple and Intel for one, have major manufacturing operations in China. Beijing could squeeze them in a retaliatory move. China is infamous for depreciating its currency, the yuan. It could do the same to make Chinese exports more competitive, and that's going to hit American companies. China could also hurt American farmers. For example, it has emerged as one of the biggest importers of soy. It bought 51 million tons from Brazil last year. A sizable chunk of its imports comes from the US, and a cut there would bleed the American agricultural sector. So China has many options. Experts say that a trade war like this is a double-edged sword. It leaves all sides wounded. If America imposes taxes, other countries, the affected parties at least, are bound to retaliate, and that would hurt American exports. So in balance, the gains made from reduced exports will not matter much, and the trade deficit will not vanish. That is Trump's idea. The businessman in Donald Trump either doesn't see this simple equation or doesn't care. The US president also has a poor record when it comes to taking good advice. He acts on a hunch most of the times. This time, he's betting on his business acumen, we are told. A tweet from March the 2nd should give you an insight into President Trump's mind. He believes that trade wars are good, and it is the only path to quote-unquote winning big. So despite opposition from within his own party against tariffs, the US president has taken this gamble, and this is his calculation. He believes that cracking down on imports from China will give him a leverage. He'll then be able to secure a better trade deal from Beijing by forcing them to come to the talking table. Good luck with that plan. It hasn't worked in the past. Nobody expects Donald Trump to take lessons from history, but if he were to look back, this is what he'll see. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which was passed during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The stock market crash of 1929 had sparked off an economic crisis in America. In an attempt to protect American industries, two lawmakers, Reed Smoot and Willis C. Hawley, pushed a law. That law increased the average tariffs on imports from 38% to 45%. The plan backfired spectacularly. The law prolonged the period of depression not just in the United States but in other countries as well. Countries like Canada that were heavily dependent on the US market imposed retaliatory taxes. In 1932, Britain and Canada decided to form a trading bloc, and US businesses suffered. Something similar is happening now. As we told you earlier, China has announced its plans to impose tariffs on American products like fruit, pork and steel pipes. As far as trade deals are concerned, 11 Pacific Rim countries are currently for a new Trans-Pacific partnership that the American president has pulled out of. The European Union, after the Brexit setback, recently signed trade deals with China and Japan. In a nutshell, America is isolating itself and fighting a losing battle. So the question is, why is the American president doing all of this? Is there a method in Trump's madness? Apparently there is. There's reason and purpose behind every infamous tweet and adolescent outburst, we are told. Why is he threatening a trade war with China? This is one theory. The point is that American jobs have been lost to Chinese business. There's enough in the media about China stealing American technology and dumping its goods in the US. China is also threatening America's allies in the Pacific, challenging over a century of the US's status as the undisputed world number one. That kind of direct language works with his constituency. Basically, the average American Joe who could be a blue-collar worker or a farmer, people with limited skills and education, they have seen jobs lost because of coal mines, because of nuclear plants and automobile plants shutting down. An article in the conservative online journal American Greatness argues that Donald Trump tried to offer an alternative when faced with legislative logjam. For instance, DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It is an Obama-era legislation which opened the doors to migrant children, but it never clarified their legal status. In other words, DACA is illegal. Donald Trump wanted it reformed and clarified. He even offered to legalize 1.8 million of them to return for $25 million to build a border wall. He wanted Congress to fix the broken immigration system, but Congress did not do its job. Similarly, the Iran deal of 2015, which was never ratified by the Senate. If it is such a great deal, the Senate can ratify it or reform, resubmit or reject. All Donald Trump is saying is that these problems are not his making and it is the constitutional duty of the Congress to sort it out. Ditto the Paris Climate Accord. It can be repackaged as a formal treaty and the Senate can pass it. Trump pundits in the US believe that he does not want to go down as a failed president by following the rule book, meaning sending bills to the Congress, watching them collapse. His constant tweeting, his attacking and arguing could reflect a determined effort, a determination to avoid the failure tag. That is Donald Trump for you. It could also be retaliation for a perceived previous slight or insult, and Trump is notoriously thin-skinned. Last October, in a magazine interview, he challenged SAG Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to an IQ test. This was in response to reports where Tillerson referred to his president as a moron, reports which Tillerson never denied. Earlier, he dismissed Senator John McCain's imprisonment in the Vietnamese jail during the war, saying it was not a war hero since he was captured. But this was after McCain described Trump supporters as crazies. According to the conservative US online journal American Greatness, and I'm quoting, collate Trump's tweets Their 24/7 responses to preemptive attacks by his critics. Donald Trump's reactions may seem petty on the outside, insulting and intemperate, but there's reason behind his madness. And when one looks at it, the economy is doing great. Employment numbers are up, so is investment. Donald Trump, with his tweets, taunts and all, may go well down as one of America's great presidents. That is what his supporters say. We believe in putting both sides of the picture out, and that is why we told you what is being said in his defense. But he's triggered a trade war, and that is the truth of it. Disgraced data mining firm Cambridge Analytica is said to have worked on political campaigns across the globe. India too is vulnerable, given the fact that general elections are just round the corner in this country. What is more troublesome is the claim that the analytics firm was allegedly involved with assembly elections in Bihar in 2015. In the backdrop of these developments and these claims, the Election Commission of India has been carrying out an investigation of its own into the entire scandal, and they have now issued a show-cause notice to Cambridge Analytica seeking details of any assignment to utilize data of Indian citizens. Meanwhile, the Election Commission has also indicated that it will review its association with Facebook for the upcoming elections across the country. India's poll panel had partnered, remember, with Facebook on at least 3 different occasions in the last year to encourage Facebook users, youngsters especially, to register themselves as voters.
Watchdog of Indian democracy. What steps do you suggest that the government must take to prevent electoral manipulation?
That is what will come to light, because social media is now a reality, and therefore Election Commission also formulated a social media engagement policy, as well as created a social media hub in the Election Commission, because it cannot be wished away, and it is a powerful tool to connect with the voters. So all those things will continue with the stipulation that if there is any vulnerability, any risk of this kind of thing happening, that data being taken from social media sites being used for profiling and affecting the electoral behavior or opinion in some adverse manner, if that is noticed and that vulnerability is detected, Election Commission will take adequate steps on that.
So we may just be looking at the tip of the iceberg as Facebook grapples with the fallout of this data breach scandal. Tech giants find themselves increasingly under pressure to safeguard the privacy of their consumers. Amid the raging scandal, Twitter's data security chief, has decided to leave the company. Interesting timing, you would say. Michael Coates, who joined the company in 2015, is said to have announced his departure to try a hand at entrepreneurship, ending his 3-year association with the social networking site. Michael Coates confirmed his move on Twitter. He tweeted, and I quote, "Twitter has been an amazing ride, but as I mentioned internally a few weeks back, my time is coming to an end. I'm confident to leave the program with an amazing security team. What's next? I'm off to co-found a security startup. Hope to share more about what we're doing soon." Reports suggest that Joseph Calimeri, a senior manager for information security and risk, who has been with Twitter since May 2016, may be taking over from Coates, though his quitting the company seems to have no link with the Facebook data breach controversy. The timing couldn't have been worse for Twitter, especially at a time when it's looking to clean up its act and delete accounts operated by bots. So some answering for Twitter to do as well. And now for the good news that we are sharing you with Gravitas on Gravitas tonight. Mumbai woke up to some new old visitors you can call them. An endangered species of turtles called the olive ridley turtles were spotted nesting on Mumbai's Versova beach. The last such sighting in that city was 20 years ago. Take a look.
Mumbai is cheering the sight. An endangered species of sea turtles called the olive ridleys seen on the Versova beach after a long gap of 20 years. Their return could well be the result of a clean-up drive started 2 years ago by a lawyer, Afroz Shah. His response summed up the meaning of the return of olive ridleys. He said, "It's the happiest day since we began cleaning the beach. If turtles have begun coming back to the beach, then it's a blessing for Mumbai." These 80 Ridley turtles hatchlings were protected till they made their way back to the sea successfully. The Oliver Ridley sea turtle is a medium-sized species of sea turtle found in warm and tropical waters. It can often be spotted sporadically in parts of Maharashtra. These turtles are best known for the unique mass nesting where thousands of females come together on the same beach to lay eggs. According to a WWF report, females return to the very same beach where they first hatched to lay their eggs. This definitely comes as a great motivation for Mumbaikars who continue to cleaning their beaches and witness another such spectacular sighting soon. The cleanup drive on the beaches of Mumbai started in October 2015 to improve and revive marine life conditions in Mumbai. And it seems finally the dedicated efforts of Mumbaikars.
Going back to America and the latest shocker from its president. He's been in office for 14 months and he's already appointed his third national security advisor, John Bolton. Isn't really a bolt from the blue. His name had been doing the rounds for a while now, but the announcement was no less stunning. This man spells war. Here's why the American press calls him a dangerous choice.
Surrender is not an option. The title of John Robert Bolton's memoir chronicles his 17-month stint as the United States ambassador to the United Nations in New York under President George W. Bush. In it, he lays bare his visceral dislike for Iran and North Korea, two countries that are in Donald Trump's crosshairs today. And that is not all. The 69-year-old Bolton with the walrus mustache shares Trump's distaste for multilateral organizations or treaties. He has welcomed Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, prefers ratcheting up pressure on China, advocates discredited American policies such as regime change, preemptive strikes, and like Trump, did not serve in the Vietnam War. But here's the clincher. At Yale Law School, Bolton had Bill and Hillary Clinton among his classmates, but by his own admission, he didn't run in their circles. Bolton is a furious tweeter. Sample some of his recent tweets. On 7th of March, he argued for pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. 2 days later, he tweeted his frustration with North Korea. And he followed it up by talking about proliferation linkages between Iran and North Korea. On the day the Washington Post broke the story about Bolton's imminent appointment as National Security Advisor, he went ballistic on Twitter about North Korea. And in the days leading up to his official nomination, Bolton targeted Iran, Russia and China, tweeting that Washington needs a long-term strategy to deal with countries like Russia and China with long-term rulers, in an unmistakable reference to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Already, Bolton's appointment has turned many people anxious. A South Korean lawmaker described it as, quote, worrisome news, end quote. If Bolton takes office and talks with North Korea go haywire and yield bad results, I don't know what we'll do then. The North, meanwhile, has kept its own counsel on Bolton's appointment. But he is no stranger for Pyongyang. On the eve of a round of six-nation talks over Pyongyang's nuclear program, Bolton called Kim Jong-un's late father, Kim Jong-il, a tyrannical dictator. North Korea was quick to respond, calling Bolton human scum. Anecdotes abound about Bolton's abrasive personality, like this one which talks about how he kept a diffused hand grenade on his desk while he served in the foreign ministry under George W. Bush. Or how he called his fellow diplomats in the ministry's East Asian and Pacific Affairs Bureau as the EPZers. The post of National Security Advisor does not require confirmation by the Senate, the upper house of America's legislature, and it would come as a relief for Trump and Bolton himself. The last time lawmakers in the Senate got together to confirm Bolton's nomination as US envoy to UN, they found him too extreme. Interestingly, his memoir contains an afterword. It is titled Challenges for the Next President. It might offer a glimpse into what the Trump-Bolton duo may plan together. With Ramesh Ramachandran, Bureau Report, Wion.
New Delhi had barely become familiar with the new set of officials in Washington when Trump decided to go in for a major overhaul of his cabinet again. Rex Tillerson was the first to go, soon to be followed by H.R. McMaster. Trump has replaced them with Mike Pompeo and John Bolton. Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval of India will be keen to learn firsthand about the policies and priorities of the new dispensation under Pompeo and Bolton. Pompeo, who was until recently, the chief of America's intelligence agency, the CIA, is known to Doval and diplomats in New Delhi. It was Pompeo, more than Rex Tillerson, who was the architect of Trump's South Asia strategy, unveiled in August last year, that gave India a preeminent role in stabilizing the situation in Afghanistan. But both Pompeo and Bolton are extremely hawkish on Iran, and that may pose a problem for India as it seeks to engage Tehran in strategic projects such as development of the Chabahar port. North Korea could be another fault line, with these two taking charge. Bolton has tweeted about problems in enforcement of international sanctions against North Korea, an issue that might come to engulf New Delhi, given a recent United Nations report detailing the trade ties between New Delhi and Pyongyang. Although Bolton has had time, and he has time and again spoken about proliferation on linkages between Iran and North Korea, he has remained silent on what India says are clear proliferation linkages between Pakistan and North Korea. So they are selective in their criticism. Moreover, Sushma Swaraj has said that with Tillerson seated beside her in New Delhi, India would not cut its diplomatic ties with Pyongyang. That's a statement that she made earlier. But what might cause anxieties in New Delhi would be how Bolton handles Pakistan. In the past, he has made a case for not pushing Pakistan too hard because of fears it might prove counterproductive for the region. Sample this. How much pressure on Pakistan is too much? The answer, and I'm quoting, if Pakistani Taliban or other radicals took control of that country, it wouldn't just be another base to launch terrorist operations against the US or Western Europe. It would be a terrorist country with nuclear weapons, so it would be Iran or North Korea on steroids right now. That's John Bolton for you. Particularly disconcerting for India will be Bolton's unhelpful attitude to the India-US nuclear deal. When it was being negotiated, Bolton, in his capacity as Under Secretary of State for International Security and Arms Control, had resisted attempts to engage India on nuclear issues. In fact, he was among those officials in the George W. Bush government who were skeptical of India's track record on non-proliferation. Bolton opposed relaxation of restrictions out of fear that Indian nuclear technology be passed on to third parties.
The United States Senate held thorough confirmation hearings. As a result, America is now...
There's a meeting that is scheduled next month between top officials, and their first assignment could well be an engagement with Sushma Swaraj and Ajit Doval. That is what makes this appointment very, very closely watched for India.
I'm profoundly honored, indeed humbled, by the...